Okay, moving right along. Session B3. Appropriate in B3, we are looking at third declension nouns. Yesterday we talked about first and second declension. Remember there are 5. So we've knocked out 2. We're now on number 3. And guess what? This is the big one. This is the declension that the majority of Latin nouns fall into. The great thing about it is that it's also kind of the black sheep of the noun family, is what I call it. You know how you have that one relative that's just kind of weird and doesn't seem to fit in? Well, for Latin, that seems to be the third of everything. Third declension nouns, third declension adjectives, which we'll talk about tomorrow, and third conjugation verbs, which we'll talk about later on. They all seem to follow their own drummer. I don't know why. The nouns of the third declension can be a little deceptive. The nominative singular has a very wide range of endings. For this reason, grammar charts often use the letter X to represent this variable nominative ending. I think they're just kind of copying the idea that we get in mathematics when we use the variable X, particularly in algebra. Okay. The one caveat, sometimes X really is the ending. Quite a few times, X really is the ending. In fact, I have one teacher friend who will not use X in that spot. I don't know what he uses. Maybe a question mark. I don't know. The unknown, the mystery spot. So be careful. Make sure that they understand that when they're filling out their noun chart and they put an X there, that's sometimes the ending, but not always. It's only one of many. Okay? However, you can always recognize the third declension noun by that good old genitive singular. And it's going to be a short IS. Here again comes in the Macron speech. If you remember your first and second declension noun charts, the ablative and dative plural were a long IS. They looked like this. Is. The genitive singular for third declension is a short IS. Is. You've got to beat the Macrons into their head from the very beginning so they understand it's important. Because here again you've got 2 different endings, and it will confuse them if they don't know how to tell the 2 apart. Now what I've done is I've reprinted here the noun list that we looked at when we talked about nouns, and I believe it was session A3 yesterday. Notice how similar the third declension nominative can be to other declensions. Let's look at these examples. Here's third declension. We have vox, vocis, nubes, nubis, and corpus, corporis. Look at nubes, that long es, the nominative singular. Do you see another declension it looks like? Fifth. You'll learn fifth in Primer C. It looks like fides. They both have a long es, the nominative singular. And fifth declension consistently has a long es, the nominative singular. That's not a variable. That's the way it always is. Corpus. What else does that look like? It looks like second declension masculine, right? But guess what? Corpus is not only third declension, it's also neuter. Okay? Promise you that one will trip them up. I have somebody get stuck on that one every single year. And it's a little bit sneaky. Okay? So make sure they memorize that genitive short is. Also look at adventus in fourth declension. It also has a us. And it's going to be consistently a us for masculine and feminine in that declension. But notice that it has a long us in the genitive singular. So if you go to your genitive singular, it's always different for the declension. You can't rely on the nominative. So that's just, again, I'm just trying to drill that into your head so that you drill it into your students' heads. We can do some serial drilling here. The gender for most nouns in the first 2 declensions is fairly easy to discern. Remember, first declension is generally feminine, but we have the pain words. Second declension, usually if it ends in a us or an r, it's masculine. If it ends in a um, then it's neuter, right? But the third declension has all 3 genders, and the nominative endings are not unique for each gender. So the only way to be certain of a noun's gender is to, guess what? Memorize it. Now, once again, if it's a girl thingy, it's feminine. If it's a boy thingy, it's masculine. Okay? But, as we saw yesterday, table's feminine. Okay? Just because it doesn't have a physical gender doesn't mean that it doesn't have a grammatical gender. So you must memorize your gender, and that's another reason why I have them marked on their flashcards from the beginning, even when it is clear. It's just to get them in that habit. We want to create, habits are good things when they're good. The masculine and feminine nouns share the exact same set of endings. Exact same set. Let's look at this next chart. In the far left-hand column, I've put the endings by themselves isolated. And in the columns next to them, I have listed the masculine and the feminine because I wanted to put them all there side by side. In chapter 19 of Primer B, this is where they teach their declension nouns and they list the endings. But I wanted to show you a masculine noun side by side with a feminine noun so you can really see the difference. Rex means king. They always remember this because of Tyrannosaurus Rex. In fact, I now have a pet snake in my home named Rex. Not too happy about that, but it's my son's passion. What are you going to do? Pray. So, Rex is masculine. Soror is sister. So, obviously feminine. Okay? So, let's look through this. Rakes. Say this with me. Rakes. Reges. Regis. Regum. Regi. Regibus. Regem. Reges. Rege. Regibus. Now look over at soror and you see that the endings are identical except for that nominative singular spot. And while it was an X for rakes, it is now an R for soror. So what do you do when they say, well, what is the ending of the nominative? Well, there really isn't. It's quite arguable that there just really isn't. So you just have to show them that. Let me show you also, too, that it also becomes increasingly important to look at the genitive for your stem. Okay? Notice with soror, the feminine noun, if I was to look it up in the dictionary, it would look like this. Soror, sororis. Okay, and they'd mark it feminine and sister. I'm not going to write sister out. For rakes, they're going to mark it like this. Rakes, regis. And it's masculine and it means king. Okay? If I go to my genitive singular here and I chop off that ending, have them do their chopping again. They're never too old to chop. Then I see that it's the same. And in fact, in a lot of dictionaries, someone asked me about this earlier, in a lot of dictionaries, you're going to see this listed just like this. They'll put a hyphen. If they put a hyphen, it's because the stem's the same as it was in nominative. I don't let my students get away with that, though. If they do it in their textbook, if they do it in their dictionary, fine. But you're mine. And you have to obey my rules because I'm the one giving the grade and I'm making you write it completely out because I want it embedded in your brain. Not just what you think it looks like, but what you know. You've practiced writing it out. So I always make them on their flashcards, on their quizzes. If they give me a hyphen IS on a quiz, it's wrong because I want them to really write it out and make sure they know it. I want to know that they know it. Okay? For this one, they'll never do that to you on something like this because you can see if I chop off my ending here, my stem is reg, and I've changed from this X to a G. And by the way, C's and X's often become changed to G's. It's just a pattern you'll start to notice. Okay? So once again, genitive singular, very, very important. Make sure they know it. In fact, on a quiz, I can't remember if I said this earlier, what I do personally is I give them the nominative singular form and I require that they write everything else out. So on a test, I would provide rakes and then it would be blank. And they'd have to write regis, masculine, king.